Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tasha's Spring Webinar Series, Supporting Students with Aggressive Behaviors with Kayla Coburn. Kayla Coburn is a former para special education teacher and education specialist, now mom of two, and inclusion consultant. Working in education since 2010, but always with a mission to include everyone in her community. Kayla is the founder of Inclusion Starts Now and a self-published author and have written 3 children's books all about inclusion. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Kayla Coburn.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. As I was just introduced, I'm Kayla Coburn, and we're going to talk about supporting students with aggressive behaviors. I will try to answer any questions that go through the chat or through the Q&A box while I'm presenting. So feel free to put out your questions. This QR code is access to the view only option, like to go view the slides, which is really good to have because I do link things in my slides, and there is a video in my slides that I think is a really good resource that will be like a clickable link once you download the presentation. The QR code will also be at the end. So if you're not able to get to it now, you will have access to it even after this presentation is done. So totally don't stress about it. Okay, we will start. So I'm going to just go over a quick agenda of how I'm hoping this will go. I'm just going to quickly introduce myself. We're going to talk about the importance of mindset, the importance of trauma. We're going to go over some strategies to bring to the classroom or to the home, different types of classroom setups, and then how to support staff and students in on your team. So let me just make sure I can't really, okay, here's the chat. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick introduction. I know Devon said a lot about what I did, but I'm just going to give a little bit more information on each one. So it all started when I was a para when I was like an undergrad not undergrad, in graduate school. I also was a paraprofessional where I was a one-on-one aide for a student who is deaf-blind with multiple disabilities. And we were in a class at the time that was called a moderate to severe special education class, where today they are now called extensive support needs classrooms. And so that was my first look as, being in a classroom with students that communicated in a variety of ways, had a bunch of different behaviors, and my first introduction to like behavior intervention plans and how to support students who, might not react the way that you're expecting them to react. And then after being a para for 2 years, became, I was in graduate school at San Francisco State University. And after that, I then became a teacher, a special education teacher, which I was for 5 years in Northern California. And then I moved to Southern California. And both of those classrooms, I think one was considered an extensive support needs classroom. And then the other one was called like a behavioral classroom. And again, that was just a lot of work with students with just a range of different ways of communication and behaviors. And I will share some stories throughout this presentation to really solidify the practices that really helped me support these students as best as possible. After my last year of teaching, I started working with the deafblind population with California Deafblind Services and Helen Keller National Center, where I was working with all ages of people who were deafblind and working with IEP teams on how best to support students, which again just was like a huge range of everything, of disabilities, of behaviors, of communication, So that again taught me just so much because I got to see a lot of like into different cultural backgrounds and like school communities and how like that affects a lot of behaviors. And now I am a parent of two, and this transition of becoming a mom has just been so great to see how much happens at home. Because as a teacher who did not have kids, I definitely had some biases where I was like, come on, parents, why can't you just do this? But how different it is when you are actually a parent and you're with your children all the time. And so I'm hoping that some of these strategies, which I have used on my own children, can also be supportive to you if you are parents. And then lastly, during all this time of being a para and teacher and working in the deafblind community, I wrote some children's books, as you see in the picture. They are all books that have disability representation and the message of inclusion. So, very it's very embedded in me that I want everyone to feel included in their community. And it really breaks my heart when people have, there's a behavior and they just feel like that child just needs to be away from everybody because, like that's the consequence, which hopefully this presentation will bring to light some information on like how we can connect with our students, how we connect with our kids, and like better ways to support everybody in these situations that can feel very scary and you could be feeling like you're at a loss. So, first we are going to define what aggressive behavior is. So, aggressive behavior in a classroom setting refers to any actions, verbal, physical, or social, that intentionally or unintentionally cause harm, disrupt learning, or create an unsafe environment for students or teachers. So, verbal aggression could be any sort of yelling, name calling, threats, hurtful remarks directed to peers or teachers. Um, Physical aggression, I could be hitting, pushing, kicking, throwing objects, or other actions that can cause harm to people or property. And then social aggression, exclusion, spreading rumors, or manipulating social situations to harm others. I say this all the time about the students and my kids that are in my home and in the classrooms. Kids know how to push our buttons. I don't know what magical superpower they have that we seem to lose as adults, but they are very good at finding what kind of could tick us off and could just like throw that in our face. And so it's so important for us to be aware of like where this aggression is coming from so we can respond in a safer way, give them, more tips, like we can model things on how we can just better support the student. So, first, we are going to talk about mindset. So, behavior is communication. I'm sure you have heard that a lot. And what I want to just go with the next step of behavior is communication. It might not always mean communication that's like happening right now in that moment. Like maybe you gave them an assignment and then they, throw their desk. This assignment might not have been the trigger. Like it could have been something internally. Maybe they're having like stomach aches, or maybe they didn't sleep well that night. Um, just trying to understand that any behavior coming out of the child is a way of them communicating some sort of need that's not being met. And it might even be a need that we can't really get them to meet. Like if a child comes to school really tired or really hungry, I mean, maybe the minimal stuff that we can do might not be enough, but like trying to find some sort of way to like connect and support the student. Um, so I want to talk about like baseline, the baseline of mindset. So having this baseline of behavior is communication is really important because having the type of idea that like this child is angry and so they're doing something towards you um, isn't going to put you in a good state of mind to support that student. So having this baseline of like all behavior is communication is really important to best support the student. So, like an example I have is I went recently to my school board, my district that I live in had this communication uh, conversation, like meeting, where anybody from the community can come, and it was a conversation about inclusive education. And so people, we all were in our groups and we kind of talked about what inclusive education is to us. And some people, when they talked about inclusive education, their baseline was some kids just can't be included. Like some kids, the general education classroom is just not supportive for them. And even if this is a true fact to people, having that be your baseline means that when a student comes in and has a behavior, your initial thought is like, well, some kids just aren't going to succeed here. So like you're going to fall back a lot easier to like not encourage the student to be there. But if your baseline in your head was like, this is going to work. I'm going to find a way to support you. We're going to find the resources to help you. Like, we want you here. That is going to change so much more on how you're going to support that student and how your classroom is going to support that student, how your school is going to support that student. So it's so important to like, you can have those bits of information of like, yes, there might be a sensory overload in this classroom. There might be some kids that are big triggers for this student. You can know all that information and that can be true, but if you fall back on that as an excuse to not include the student, inclusive education is just not gonna get any better. So having that baseline is really just like the beginning of inclusive education, or the foundation of the inclusive education to really work. And then last for mindset is really working on language. So students are going to have behaviors, and I'm going to try to use language, all the appropriate language that I try to use in my everyday life. Um, but language of like this, the student was so mad he was just screaming at me, and like saying something like that can make you feel like, that the student's like trying to hurt you, where instead like that's not being productive into like what the student's actually trying to communicate. So you could, instead of saying like the student's screaming at me, even if they are screaming at you, trying to think of it in a way of like, okay, the student is screaming and they seem very upset. Like how can I support them in this? Because, if they're screaming towards you, they're trying to communicate something towards you. And even though that's not the way you want them to communicate it, like you can see that there's something happening, but there's a barrier that they're having to face, and we need to like, push down that barrier to support them. Um, there was another language thing I was just about to say, and I totally lost it. Um, oh, dang. Well, I'm sure I'll think about it later. But just having that language, um, I mean, really in your own mind, but also when you're talking to staff. Because if we are going to start talking bad about kids who are having these big feelings and big behaviors, we're going to start not feeling very motivated to support them. Um, because if we start thinking that, these kids trying to communicate something are bad, like we're not going to feel very motivated to want them included in our community. Instead, if we look at that behavior as them communicating and um, how can we best support them, that's how we're going to get them in the classroom successfully and safely. So next we're going to talk about trauma. So trauma is huge, and I wish we talked more about trauma. So before we dive more into trauma, I want to talk about this visual that I just really love. So here's this child, a picture of a child, a very happy child. And here are just some things that might be traumatic for a child, of not having a stable home, not having consistent meals, having a hostile environment, aggression, bad sleep, can't get the resources they need. These are all things. And when the child has these things attached to their everyday life, it's going to be a lot harder to see that happy child because they're trying to deal with really challenging things that a lot of we don't want children to have to deal with, but unfortunately, that's just what happens. It's hard to get resources for parents, and we're all trying to do our best. Um, but even one of these can cause so much dysregulation in a day. And I mean, personally, from my own children at home, like if one of them doesn't get a good sleep or if one of them got a little too much screen time, I mean, okay, I don't think screen time is trauma, but if they like missed a meal for some reason, if they like weren't hungry and didn't eat their snacks at school and then they come home and they have like just all these big behaviors because they don't know how to regulate, if that's something they're consistently getting, that can really affect even their brain development on how to communicate, how to deal with these big behaviors in a safe and healthier way. So this is the video that is so good. It's about 16 minutes long. Um, and I'm just gonna just kind of I'm gonna give you a little summary about it. Um, oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure there's nothing in the chat. Uh, I'm just gonna give a little summary about it, but this is a video, it's a TED Talk, and I think sitting down and watching this with your classroom staff, your IEP team, sending it to your school, I think would be so beneficial for more people to learn about what trauma does to the brain. So, this woman goes over just like the scientific data that of what trauma does to a child's developing brain. And it really affects different parts of the brain of a really big part is the fight or flight mode. And so maybe really little things can just lead to really big behaviors because they're having a really hard time regulating that area in their brain. The good news is that those are things that can be retaught, but it takes practice and it takes doing the same things over and over again for them to basically rewire their neural pathways that are in this fight or flight trauma mode. So being aware, and I think again, having this information is just so helpful to really support a student, um, who's having these big behaviors and you don't know how to support them and you want to, but it's hard for you too. And we're going to get into that next, but um, understanding that a lot of our students might be coming from, and you might not know. I mean, it's not like even at IEP team meetings, you're going to know what their house life is always like. But understanding that like most people have some sort of trauma in their life. And those big moments um, are something that will stick with you. I'm actually going to share a story of my oldest about, I want to say like this was October, 6-ish months ago. She had a pretty scary accident at home, and had a very big cut on her head. And it was very scary. There was blood, and we had to rush to the emergency room. And it was probably the most panicked she's ever seen me because it was a very, very scary moment also for me. And she was a trooper. We got to the emergency room. She got stitches and went through the whole process, recovered. And it's been about 6 months. And whenever she hits her head, no matter how small or big it is, her initial jump is to go back to that time she had that big head injury because that was a huge moment in her life. I mean, that in her 4 years of living, that was the worst accident she's ever had. And so now it's become this, her brain automatically goes to that trauma when she has her head will like lightly get hit. Um, and her response even is the same response to when she had that big head injury, where she'll, the crying is just like worse than what it used to be. And she screams and cries and she feels to see if the same thing happened again. And it kind of takes me to remind her, like, you do bonk your head a lot, and it's not always going to be like that one time, but it takes time, and I have to keep modeling, like, okay, take a breath, like feel where your head got hit, like, how does it feel? Does it feel bumpy? Does it, we have to really remind her to check in um, on what she's feeling now instead of jumping back to this like traumatic moment that happened to her. And especially as like someone in the classroom, you're not going to know a lot of traumatic events that happen with your children, with your students. And as I'll share a story later, but the conversations I had with parents really helped me support my students with aggressive behaviors in my classroom. So it is so important to have that open dialogue, but we will get to that because first we need to talk about regulating yourself, because you are supposed, when people are dysregulated around us, especially when you're the classroom, the support provider, the parent, you also need to make sure you're regulated to help the student or children in need. Um, so you have to remind yourself, as I was talking about with mindset, that their behavior is communication and it is not a personal attack towards you. It could feel like that. And they might be coming towards you with hitting or kicking. I mean, that I understand how this language is kind of trying to pull that away, but I just feel like if we can understand that they're hitting and pushing because they're angry and they're trying to communicate that they're angry towards us, like that is how we get to the next step of supporting them. Regulating yourself, you have to model. You have to model this to your students. And I do this all the time with my students and with my kids, where the second they're dysregulated and start screaming or crying, like I make sure both my feet are planted. I will take a big breath. If it's safe, I'll maybe even close my eyes. There's been times I've had to walk out of the room of my, or like walk right outside the door where, again, this is a safe way to, if you're able to do this, um, to give myself just a second to feel regulated or to ground myself so I can come in and be the best person I can to support my students or children. And something that my mom used to tell me a lot about her partners, like relationship partners, is that like once you get really close, or I would say this with any relationship, but once you get closer and closer to someone, you don't seem to keep trying hard to show them that you care. Like and you kind of start becoming like, I don't know, like this punching bag sometimes. Like, if you're like in a relationship with someone, like, I know me and my partner had this once we started having kids, and it was like, we were working so hard to support them that we'd get back to each other and we'd kind of like be more snippy or rude to each other. And so trying to understand like our students might be have this like really close relationship with us. And so like we could be seen as like this punching bag to them, which in any case is not good. So we need to teach students and people like how we can respect each other and happily communicate to each other in helpful ways. Which again, I'll give you a lot of resources about all this. Um, and then no child is going to tell you that they're at their tipping point, especially when we have these like aggressive behaviors that we are trying to figure out and support. And I feel like one of the best examples I can give with this is we got a dog. And so we were doing dog training. And this teacher was a great teacher. And she was talking about like, because we were doing like walking etiquette with a dog. And she was like, no dog is going to grab a leash and hand it to you and be like, teach me how to walk on a leash, please. Like, no dog is going to ask you to do that. And it made me think about like children, how children aren't just going to be like, hey, I'm feeling really dysregulated. I know I have this trauma that I'm trying to deal with. Like, can you help me out? Because they don't have that language. They don't have that understanding. I mean, they don't know why they're responding this way. They just know that they are. And so that's why we're coming in to help them through all this. So I guess what I'm trying to say, this is a very personal job, and I'm trying to remind you not to take it so personally, which is hard, and it feels kind of like Like when things, oh my gosh, I still have pretty bad mom brain, so I will like randomly forget words that I used to use all the time. But hypocrite. It feels a little hypocritical, but it is something that can really help you stay not take behavior so personally. But if you do, I got a tool for that, so that's okay. Um, Oh, I also want to talk about different modeling techniques. So another modeling technique that I've really loved is so when a child or student is dysregulated, and I'm also feeling dysregulated from it, I will start using the things around me, like in the classroom or at my home. Like maybe I'll get out bubbles and I'll start blowing bubbles because now I'm taking big, long breaths. And maybe I'll be like, hey, you want to do some bubbles? Or if I get out some Play-Doh, I'll start getting out Play-Doh and pinching it or rolling it in a ball, like trying to do things. Or if I want to hit something, maybe I'll go grab a pillow and I'll start hitting it and be like, hey, do you want to hit this? Just kind of doing these things of like, I'm also doing it. So I'm gonna connect with you through this behavior. Um, so that flight or fight mode that we were talking about, that students are going through, possibly because of trauma or whatever their background is, you are also going through that flight or fight mode. So when a child has a big behavior all of a sudden or an aggressive behavior, it's hard to also ground ourselves. I know, especially with my two kids at home, when they start whining or crying, my initial response is that I tense up and I can feel that my body tenses up and I look over and I'm like, what's wrong? Like, what? And they'll just be like, I dropped my snack. And they're, I understand why they're so sad, but my response is also very exhausting to feel that every time they cry or whine about something to tense up. And that was something I also felt in the classroom when a student maybe threw something like across the room. Like it was an immediate tense up because I was like, oh gosh, like, what's going to happen? Where are we going to go? There's a lot of things going through your mind and you're trying to stay safe and you want everyone else to feel safe. And, how are we going to do that if we are in this flight or fight mode? So before supporting a child with a behavior, we need to ask ourselves, what are they trying to communicate? Are they hurt? Are they bored? Are they tired? Are they hyper? Are they happy? Do they need a break? Do they need more stimulation? I mean, it can go either way. I have seen kids have to do the same worksheet over and over and over again because people just didn't think that they could do harder stuff. And there were a lot of behaviors when that same worksheet came out, and they would be like, I don't know why this is happening. They know how to do this worksheet. And it's like, cool, that might be the reason they know how to do it. How about we give them something harder that's more like stimulating for their brain? Um, and then what can we safely do right now to support our students? Um, so we are going to talk about ABC charts, which will really help with like figuring out the precursors and how we can support them before the behavior escalates. Um, okay, so next. So this is what I do for every behavior out there. Um, and I basically I follow the steps of as if I was on fire. I stop, drop, and roll. So I stop placing demands or asking questions to the student. If the student is starting to have a behavior, hitting, throwing, saying something, any sort of behavior, I stop and I like ground myself before I even respond because I don't want to respond in a way that might trigger them to get even more frustrated. Um, Also, if a student or child is up in that, like if they're starting to have a behavior or they're starting to look upset or be upset, they're not going to be able to hear you as well. So if you're sitting there trying to tell them like, hey, stop, calm down, get, sit down, let's just talk it out, they might have already lost that ability to hear you and get that support. So the first thing to do is stop and like figure out your surroundings. What area are we at this point? Like, is this a time to evacuate the classroom? Is this a time to ask the student, like, you know, redirect the student to like go for a walk or go sit down in a quiet area? Um, but it's really to stop and you're assessing like your flight or fight mode and how you're going to support the student. Next is drop. I as long as it's safe, I love to drop to the student's eye level. Kneel down, sit in a chair, get down to their level because they're constantly looking up and I feel like that would be uncomfortable. So I drop to their level, and I still might not be talking at this point. If they're really agitated, I might just be sitting down on the ground and with my hands, I just might be taking deep breaths. I'm making it as like, I'm not a threat. I'm not here to like tell you you're behaving wrong. I'm here to connect with you. And I'm gonna like model how I'm gonna like take a breath and, calm calm myself down. And then we're gonna roll through the emotions together. So, and a lot of times the stop and drop part, I feel like already will regulate a child because usually when there's like a behavior and they're starting to get, bigger and bigger, the worst thing you can do is like, hey, don't do that. Stop, come over here. And when you start doing that, they're getting even more stimulated and it's just gonna like go off the tracks. So being able to stop and drop and like give them that safe place to feel their emotions is such a great way to start supporting those big behaviors and then rolling through those emotions. I have some book resources that I'm sharing at the end of this presentation, but one of them is called The Whole Brain Child, and they talk a lot about how to roll through these emotions with students, kids. And it's a lot about connecting with how they're feeling. So giving them, oh, and you know what? I just remembered that language thing I wanted to talk about. Uh, so when you connect with a child, using language that is giving you a way to connect. So it's not like, wow, you look really mad right now, or you look really upset. Saying things like, well, first saying like feel. So not saying like you are mad, you are upset. You're saying like, oh, it sounds like you're feeling pretty upset right now. Um, so giving like that little language twist of saying like, and even for yourself, being like, I'm feeling really overstimulated right now, or I'm feeling pretty upset right now. So it's making it like, I'm not mad. I'm not a mad person, but I'm feeling mad, which we all feel. And so that's a really easy language flip that we can make that makes it so much more of an emotion we're trying to support than like a kid who's like a mad kid or a angry kid because that's we all have our happiness there, we just have to find it. So the book The Whole Brain Child also talks about connecting, and it's a lot about empathy. So like if I like we're not having any more cookies. Like maybe we made cookies as a treat or had cupcakes from someone and a kid wants another cupcake and you're like, "Oh, we're only going to have one today." And then they start getting mad. Maybe they go and hit someone next to them. And you can, come up to them and like, make sure everyone's safe. And then, say like, yeah, I also get really upset when I can't have more of something that I want because, yeah, cupcakes are so good. Of course, I'd want more. And then kind of start rolling through that of like, yeah, when I feel really upset, I try to think about like, when's the next time I get to have a cupcake? Or what are other fun things I get to eat today? Or maybe you can do some imagination play. And I love redirecting is, the goal is the ending of this, but it's really connecting with them with that emotion that they're feeling, empathizing that you also feel that emotion and you're like connecting with them, and then trying to redirect. Um, Actually, one more thing I want to say about the stop, drop, and roll is that we should never avoid how they're feeling. And we should never avoid what they're trying to communicate. So if they're trying to communicate they want another cupcake, the worst thing you can do is like, oh, no more, and then try to redirect it. I have found this with every child I've ever worked with, being able to say the sentence that they're trying to communicate to them is so helpful. So they're saying they want another cupcake, however they're saying it. Maybe they're just reaching for it. And you can say first, "Oh, are you telling me you want another cupcake?" And then if they're like, "Yes," and you can be like, "I hear you. Like, we're just having one today, but maybe I can send one home and your parent can give you one like tomorrow or tonight, whatever." Like being able to confirm you're hearing their sentence, even if they're not getting it, I feel like takes away so much aggression that they're holding on to. Because not like if you just ignore that sentence that they're trying to communicate to you, even if they're not getting it, um, it like reaffirms that you're hearing what they're saying. And like that's part of the struggle. Because if you just start being like, "No, no, we're not doing anymore. Come on, let's go do art," that could feel like they're being dismissed, they're not being heard, which again could be a huge trigger as children who don't get heard a lot. I mean, especially kids that are in special education classrooms, I don't feel like people are always trying to listen to the way that they're trying to communicate. And so when you can affirm what they're saying, but then still stay true to that boundary that is being set or the rule that's being set, it will help so much more to flow through the emotion or the behavior. Okay, I'm not sure if I have any questions yet. I don't see any. So if there are any that I'm missing, just feel free. Nope, nope, I don't see any. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in there. Okay, move into the next slide. So when you know that there is a behavior, again, I'm going to give you a resource to like find behaviors or figure out what is triggering behaviors. But I first want to talk about this. So when you know there's a behavior, here are all of these different ways that we can help teach the student a better way, a safer way to feel this emotion, and to not so much do a behavior that could be aggressive or dangerous. So I love social stories. Social stories are my favorite thing. I would even say I used to do them so much more, and it even as like a tool to help me learn what I wanted to talk to with the child. Because after so many social stories, I felt like I got a lot better at being able to communicate like, here are the expectations. If you don't want to do it, here's how you can get out. And here's something maybe that we'll get afterwards, like if we need some sort of like positive reinforcement. Also, social stories are like way more available now. I know we got a couple of like Love Every books. I think that's what I don't know, Lovevery. I don't know how to say it, but they have a lot of books. They are bougie, but Facebook Marketplace is my favorite place in the world, and a lot of people sell their used books on there. And we found Love Every books in the free libraries and stuff. They might even be at libraries. I haven't even thought of that. But they could just go through a kid's day where we had one where it was like B goes to the doctors, and it talks about how she goes to the doctors and there's a aquarium, a fish tank at her doctor's office, and she gets to count the fish. And then, they go and measure her height and her weight and look in her ears and a stethoscope and all this stuff. And today she has to get a shot and it hurt. And, then it was all done. It was quick, but it's going to keep me healthy and the people around me healthy. Like and it's super simple language, talks about how your parents are there to support you, your caregivers. Um, I used to make my own social stories, which is very easy to do. I would use, whatever Microsoft Word or whatever Canva I know has like a free option, whatever way you do. You could even write it really. But having paper, taking pictures, especially of the student, I feel like makes it so much more personable. And then giving them the language of like, I had a student, we got to do like horse therapy, which was so cool, such a great opportunity. But he was really afraid to get on the horse. And I talked to, and we were going for 4 weeks. And so I talked to his parents, and I'm like, yeah, he really did not want to get on the horse, had a lot of like aggressive behaviors toward himself. Like, has he ever been on a horse before? And they said yes. And they did say they're like, there is a lot of behavior leading up to being on the horse, but then once he's on the horse, he's really excited. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's like it's good for me to know that background. So now let me tell the student how we're going to do this. And so the social story was all about like we get to go to this farm and ride a horse in a circle. And my teachers are there to keep me safe. I can pick the staff member who can walk next to me so I feel safe. And I can get off at any time. So it's like, I'm going to try to sit on the horse, or maybe I'm going to try to get close. Like, what was the goal for us that day? Our goal was to get him on the horse because we knew that he's been on a horse before. But if it was a student that's never been on a horse before, maybe it was just to go pet the horse. Like it really depended on the student too. But then we always gave them a way out. And we also gave him a positive reinforcement of like, maybe we'll get some like a fun video like once we're done, like on our phones or something. The joys of technology. So social stories were a great way to help a student through something that might trigger a behavior, to like give them clear expectations, give them a way out, show them that they're safe, and then like give them like what's going to happen afterwards. Like kind of it's even like another redirection of like, and then when we're done, we get to do this. Great job. Um, and then so practicing. This is so my best example is so I had a behavior therapist share with me to practice things that cause behaviors. So like one time we had to cancel like going to our school library, and some students had some really big behaviors, and we as like a staff, I mean it was like multiple kids, and we were all like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And once it was all done, the behavior therapist was like, you should schedule cancellations so you can like practice with everybody how to get through when like the schedule changes abruptly. Because if we know what's triggering the behavior, then we can at least look out for it so we can practice a better way to feel those feelings. So we knew that when things were canceled, we had to like practice a better way to feel that frustration. And so we first taught them after everyone was regulated and back and we were good. We talked about how it sucks that some things are canceled, and it's like something that will just forever happen in life. There is no way that we can 100% be sure that life is not going to throw us a wrench. So we talked about it, and we talked about, next time we're feeling mad, what can we do? And then we practiced those. So it was like, okay, maybe I had a little trampoline in the classroom. Maybe we can go jump on the trampoline. I had a thing that you can punch. Maybe you can go punch that thing. I had some sequin pillows that we can go around. Again, all of these are going to be linked. So don't need to take notes on all the resources I had. But and so then we would practice. And so we would go around and let the students practice like, okay, I'm feeling mad. I'm going to go kick like this band thing under my chair. Um, and so then we would practice something being canceled. And so I would just put something random on the schedule, and I would say like, okay, everybody, like, and this would be like maybe a week later. I'd be like, okay, sadly, the screen isn't working and we're not going to be able to do these songs. Instead, we're going to do a story, like, and then kind of like see how kids are reacting. It's like, I know, I hate it when things get, canceled right out from underneath us. And so then we'd like go and direct them to these safer ways to be angry and feel those feelings. And just like being able to practice these makes it so much better that when something does happen that's out of your control, you will see that your children will fall back on these new ways that you're teaching them. But it takes time. It takes time, it takes patience, and it takes like repetition. This is not something that you're just going to go over once and then be like, cool, good job, everyone. Like it is something you will continue to practice with our kids. Collaboration, having everybody on the same page. So everyone in the classroom needs to know the plan. If there's a behavior intervention plan for a student, any adult who is working with that student has to know the plan. I had such a horrible experience at a school once. I had a student that got suspended for hitting. He hit another staff member that was not a person in my classroom, and this staff member did not know his behavior intervention plan. And so when the student was getting agitated, he kind of just tried to put his foot down and was like, "You need to stop." And then the kid hit him, and it was a whole scene. And I was super upset because the staff member was not following what the IEP team had as a plan that was like successfully working for the student. And then the student got sent home, which was not a good consequence for the student because they were being sent home to a family that didn't have the resources to be able to watch him all day. And so he got like unlimited screen time, which, I mean, we're all just trying to live our lives and do what we can, but this student was then learning if he could hit someone, he gets to go home and not have all these demands put on him. Um, so it was something where, I'm not saying hitting is something to be ignored. All behavior needs to have a conversation and an appropriate consequence for that student. Um, so making sure all staff is on the same page is very important. Planning. So, behavior intervention plans, we'll go over this. IEP goals, we'll go over this. A way to communicate between adults. I have some resources that will come up. All of those have their own slide. And then alternatives. If something isn't working, change it. If you've been doing something with a student for like a month and the data is just showing that there is no change and it's not helping, change it. Which I'll go over in a story on my next slide. And then reflection. Behaviors happen. Even with all the training in the world, behaviors are still going to happen. And being able to reflect on the behavior and talk about it with the staff afterwards, even talking about it with your students afterwards, can be really beneficial. Once my kids or my students have then regulated, I'll come talk to them afterwards and just be like, "Hey, that felt like really tough. Are you okay?" Like, checking in with them and being like, I that felt pretty dysregulating for me too. Like, is there something I can do to help you more next time? Or, having these conversations, even if they're not going to answer you in a way that you would want them to, letting them know that you still care, you still love them, you're still here to support them, is really important. And also, you will also be dysregulated. I would be a complete liar if I said I've never yelled at children or students or been really mad. I mean, we are all human. Being able to have these feelings and emotions and then being able to talk about it afterwards is just so important for all of us to grow and be able to work together. So, story time. I had a student who was just super angry. Sorry, he just felt a lot of angry emotions at school and at home. And we had an open conversation with the parents, and he was spitting a lot towards people. He was hitting himself, he was hitting others. He had his finger like a lot, like in his eye or in his ear. Like it was always having to like give himself a lot of pressure. And it just like kept escalating. And he had a one-on-one behavior therapist with him all the time. And things just were not getting better. Any sort of system we were trying to put in place was just like not working. And towards the end of like a month or two, he started going on top of a table and hanging upside down and like would flip over. And sometimes he would like fall onto like his head, his side of his body. And we would try to protect him as much as we could, but it was like we just could not support him the way that he needed support. And one day when he was doing this, he was really just focusing on this part on his head. And not to brag, I have had a lot of cavities and root canals as a child. And I have had them where they are so painful, and it like, when you have tooth pain, sometimes you don't know what's in your tooth. Like it can hurt your head, it hurts your jaw. And I knew his diet wasn't very good. His favorite food was like goldfish and Swedish fish, or no, like gummy bears. It was a lot of like chewy, sticky things and Cheetos. And I remember talking to his parents and I was like, um, And he was little. I mean, this was like kindergarten or first grade. And I asked his parents, I was like, so has he ever been to the dentist or are you guys able to brush his teeth at home? Because I think he might have like a cavity or something. And they were thankfully very honest and they were like, we've been dealing with all of the behaviors that we just like we don't know how to go to a dentist. Like he's not going to sit on a chair. He's not going to let them examine his mouth. Like we can barely brush his teeth at night. Like that's a whole thing. And they were just so exhausted trying to support their child and they were like, we haven't. So we together worked on getting insurance figured out on how, what dentist could support him because he was going to have to be uh, under anesthesia to get a dental exam. And during that dental exam, they found multiple cavities and a rotten tooth that needed to be pulled. And it was probably the most like it was like one of those diagnoses that like you don't ever want to wish on someone, but you were also like, oh my gosh, is this why you're hurting? Like this was his way of communicating that he was in so much pain and he just did not know how to tell us. Oh, you know what? There we go. Uh, so they scheduled the appointment. He had to get all of his teeth drilled. He had to get some teeth pulled. They kept him home for a couple of days to recover. And we had to change his diet. We had to change his diet. We had to introduce toothbrushing. We worked on it in the classroom as well. And it made such a difference. So much of his aggressive behaviors that he had just went away. He never got on the table again to flip onto his head. He never walked around just like punching his jaw. Like things that he was doing that we were just like trying so hard to stop was something that he didn't know how to communicate to us. He's never been to the dentist. I mean, I would say my two children who are considered typically developing, we still talk about dentists and cavities all the time. And it's still, it's a very abstract idea to them. So this was just a huge, long process of us finally realizing like, oh my gosh, your behavior is communicating something huge. Um, I just see a question. Are you only speaking about students who reliably use verbal speech to communicate? No, none of my students were verbal, oh my gosh, were reliably using verbal speech. Even my students who did have a lot of words, I would say none of them had ways to communicate verbally before a behavior happened. So when I mean behavior is communication, I even mean like what their behaviors are communicating something to me and it's like my job to kind of interpret what they're meaning. So like how I did with this student, um, I just kept trying to track all this information. I'm like, okay, well, his head seems to hurt. And I know he eats like this. And then I got to talk to his parents and I got to like, I mean, it was kind of like this detective situation of trying to figure out all these things of what was happening with the student. Um, and most of the students, especially when I was in elementary school, we were introducing AAC devices. We were introducing sign language. We were really trying to focus on gestures and movement. Um, I mean, it's like that sentence, non-compliance is communication, something like that. No, non-compliance is self-advocacy. So it's like if a student is at a desk and they keep standing up to leave, like that's communication. They're communicating that they don't want to do this assignment. Why do they not want to do the assignment? We don't know. Does that mean they're not going to do the assignment? No, but we need to figure out why they're leaving because they're communicating. They're like, nope, I don't want to do this. And is it too hard? Is it too easy? Do you not want to sit down? Maybe I can follow you around and we can do this assignment. But trying to do those different things to like figure out why their behavior is happening. So that's like, I guess, how to connect it again to behavior is communication. Thank you for your question. I love questions. So if anyone has more questions, Send them in. Um, so, as I was just talking about with self-advocacy, teaching them how to advocate for themselves. I have been into so many classrooms where people are just dragging kids through the schedule of like, yep, time to do this, time to do this. And a child will like, move their hand or try to leave or not want to do something. And it's like, nope, that's just what's on the schedule, time to do it. Taking that time to figure out what the child's communicating is really important. As I said before, training is just, it's so important. If you are at a school that has a lot of students with aggressive behaviors, every year I did the CPI training or NCPI, non-crisis NC. Oh my gosh. If you look up CPI training, I'm pretty sure it'll show up. But that's something like if you have a lot of students with aggressive behaviors, especially physically, that is a group that does annual trainings because that's something to be certified on every year to be able to keep everybody in the classroom safe and the students safe. Um, and yeah, and then also having really clear rules in the classroom for the staff. So a couple rules that we had was that you can never take away recess. Um, which I wish I did not have that my first year teaching, but I learned very quickly that that was a bad thing to take away because students need recess, students need their breaks, they need their time to regulate the way that they want to regulate. Um, and so I had to tell my staff because there were a couple of times they'd be like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna call your mom and tell them you're not gonna get recess," and I'd have to be like, don't even say it. If it's not something you can take away, don't even tell the student that you can take that away. I also did not like food as incentives to do things. I mean, sometimes it'd be like, yeah, we'll make waffles after we like all go here or something. But I would try very hard to never like let that be like, okay, you got 10 tokens, here's a gummy bear. Because I don't want food to be a part of like why we're acting the way we're acting. It's important to like really instill that these behaviors are ways to like be safe and inclusive and communicate our needs. And you're welcome. Thank you for saying this. You're welcome. Okay, so following the child. This is like the best way, especially for students who we might not have a solid way to understand like their expressive language. Following them is such a beautiful way to learn what they're trying to communicate to us. So I had a student, he was non-speaking. He used some sign language. We tried to do an AAC device. I had him in like first grade. He was very little. And he just was, he was very like would show you, would kind of like show you what he wanted if he needed something. So we were at like a Special Olympics soccer field trip, and his mom came with us. And he just kept pulling on her arm and trying to get out. And she was just holding on. And she even, like, at this point, her arm was like she had a bone that was kind of like starting to stick out because she was constantly pulling on her child. And because she was like, come on, we have to go do this. Like, come on, what are you doing? And so we were at this field trip. We had so many adults, thankfully, with us. And I told her, I'm like, you know what? We're in a safe place. I'm a quick runner. Let him go. I'm gonna just follow him. And we'll come back once I can figure out like what he wants. So she let him go and he just bolted. And so I'm running after him. Thankfully, he was in first grade. So he was not faster than me. Um, and we were in a gated area, so it was safe. But I'm, running after him, and he went straight to this big blue pad. That's like, I don't know, pole vaulter, high jump, where you go over the bar. And he just jumped right on top of it and started jumping and was laughing and smiling and was so happy to be on this blue, like, crash pad. And I was like, oh my gosh, you saw this and you have been trying to get to it this whole time while we are all over there doing soccer stuff. And so then it was like, now that I knew what he wanted, I was like, cool, let's jump on this for a couple minutes. And then, like, towards the end, I was like, okay, we are going to go back and do the next soccer station. Once your turn is done, You can come back here and do more jumping. And right away, he just jumped off and went right back to soccer, did it to go right back to the blue crash pad. And again, I'm not saying every story is going to be like this, um, but more often than not, I think you'll be surprised how often following the child is going to teach you what they're trying to communicate to you. And then planning behaviors. We already talked about that, but really trying to really practice how to feel a big behavior in a safe way. So when it does happen in a way that you might not feel prepared, the child might be more prepared than you think because they've been able to practice. And what's that? It's practice makes permanent now. That is very true. I've seen it with my students, with my kids, all real. Okay. ABC chart. So the ABC chart, again, at the end, when you have the QR code again, this ABC chart is linked. I'm pretty sure you can get ABC charts for free, like anywhere on Google. So what it is, it's a way to track data. And again, this is kind of like a social story where if you start practicing this, you'll start being able to do it without the chart as much. So A is antecedent. That is what happened right before the behavior. And really track anything. You can, and first put the date and time in place. That's all important because maybe when you look back at this, the parent could be like, oh, that was when we came back from a weekend visiting our aunt and, whatever. Maybe they were super dysregulated the next day. And then maybe a time, maybe you start noticing that like Wednesdays at 2 o'clock is really hard. Why is it so hard Wednesdays at 2? Oh, they just got out of that class that was like a 2 hour block period, whatever. You can start seeing patterns just by tracking the date, time, and place. Um, so antecedent, it could be anything of like a student walked by them, like, like, because if you see a behavior and you're literally like, whoa, where did that come from? Think about every little detail that just happened. Like, did a loud noise happen outside? Did the air conditioning turn on inside? Like, is there glare on their desk? Like, you can focus on, so, like, did someone say something next to him that maybe you didn't hear? Um, just like any sort of like or were they doing math work? Write down what happened right before the behavior and then write down the behavior. So talk about what happened. Did they hit the teacher? Did they hit students? Did they scream towards someone? Were they just screaming? Did they throw something? Like what was the specific behavior? And then sometimes even that specific behavior, maybe it's like, oh, they threw their scissors and you're like, that's really scary. In a flight or fight mode, you're just like, take away the scissors. But maybe they're trying to communicate like maybe they got pinched by the scissors. Maybe they were getting frustrated with the scissors. Maybe those scissors don't fit. Maybe they're left-handed and those scissors are right-handed scissors. Um, Being able to track the exact behavior can also help with the antecedent, partnering all that together. And then C, what happened right after? So how did they eventually come down? Was it 10 minutes of being really dysregulated? Oh man, also when we talk about behavior, look at the clock. If you are able to look at the clock and write down the time, open your phone, start a stopwatch. When we had our first baby, I remember when she would start crying, it felt like 20 minutes would go by and it was like a minute. Um, when there is a behavior and you're in a flight or fight mode where you're just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to support them? What's going to happen? Time does not feel like it's happening the way that you feel like it should be happening. So if you are able to look at the clock or write down or start a timer on your phone, um, track how long that behavior is going on. And then what happens afterwards? Are they exhausted afterwards? Are they trying to do something where they're like, oh, I didn't like that behavior, rewind. And like, I had a student that used to have some scripting, and that was one of the things he would say. He would have a big, you know, he would lose at a game and he would like rip it, throw it, and then be like, whoops, that's not okay, rewind. And then he would go through and rewind everything. And his mom said too that she was like, he does it all the time at home. So when we could see ABC, like he lost a game, he didn't like it, the behavior was destroying, ripping up the game and throwing it so nobody could play. The consequence was that he would then verbally go back through the game, rewind and start over. So then we were able to practice, like, you know what, and talk about, like, we don't always get to win games. And what's fun with games is that everyone gets turns to win. And when you do win, it's more fun because if we win every time, it's not going to be as much fun. And we kind of got to talk about all these different things with the student. And then, inevitably, when they would lose again, we were more prepared to support them through that behavior. So maybe if I knew they were about to lose, maybe I might move the game and like have a different, activity, or maybe I'd give them a toy to throw towards the wall. Be like, here's a stuffed ball, throw it. Yeah, like it sucks to lose. I know it's a hard thing to learn to have good sportsmanship. That's a tricky thing to teach kids. Um, Oh my gosh, I didn't even read the bullet points that I wrote down. Use it with your idea. Oh yeah. And like, so fade out the ABC chart. If you don't, after a while, you'll start being able to see A, B, and C, and you might just get to fade it out. Even though I would say tracking data is so important. Any behavior, you should be tracking it anyways, but you might not need to track it in the moment every time if you're able to, like, start just making notes and then put it on an ABC chart later to share with people. It really helps your brain practice this technique and the data. It's so important, especially if you are here. I am assuming that you have students that have aggressive behaviors. Um, Tracking that data is so important to make a good BIP, which is a behavior intervention plan. You got to document everything. Um, so important to bring to the IEP team so you guys can make a behavior intervention plan that the parents can agree to follow, or the caregivers can agree to follow at their house, um, that people can follow at the school, that the administration agrees on, that all the therapists that the service providers the student might see throughout the day, everyone will know how to support that student in the best way because of a BIP. Now, I also feel like behavior intervention plans should really only be for serious behaviors um, that are affecting their safety and the classroom safety. Uh, I have every once in a while, I see a behavior intervention plan for things that I just don't really, that I feel like could have been a goal. Um, BIPs, and if you have a child that has an aggressive behavior, your IEP should have a BIP in it. So BIPs are something that are in IEPs. So hopefully that's totally not new information. Just make sure you have one if you have a student with aggressive behaviors. And then trying as a team to understand where these behaviors are coming from. That is, I mean, there should be no mystery between the parents and the staff, the classroom staff, on a child's behavior and how we're supporting it. That is a team effort. Um, in an IEP, trying to keep the language either positive or helpful, just as saying, like, a student, like maybe if you have a student that elopes, don't ever call a student an eloper. Like just being able to say that the student elopes when the situation is getting overstimulating. Like that is a much better way to say it and successfully support the student um, and their way of communication. Addressing behaviors and how to best support the student so future teachers and case managers are prepared should also be in the IEP. Um, and then being thoughtful on behavior goals. Uh, I know this is going to be kind of just different for everybody, but there are some behaviors that I don't think we need to get rid of, where I've worked with teachers that like try to get rid of stimming behaviors. Um, which is not stimming. Stimming should never be something that you're trying to get rid of. It could be something that maybe they need a place and a time to do it or a way to ask to do it, especially if it's like disruptful for the class. I know recently I had someone reach out to me saying they had a student that just like kept whistling and they just didn't know how to get them to stop whistling during the day. And so we talked about like, what are other ways that they could get that sort of like sensory input that's not whistling loudly? Like, are they able to have like a straw and blow through that? Um, are we able to give them like a lot of breaks throughout the day to whistle? Or is whistling helping them concentrate? So then, like, how do we make sure that they're getting that need that they need? And then also sometimes, I mean, I know we're talking about aggressive behaviors for this presentation, but sometimes there are behaviors that I feel like the staff might be getting more frustrated than like the student, the peers, all the learners are actually feeling. So being able to be aware of that. Um, okay. Woo! We're doing it, everybody. We're doing great. Okay, appropriate consequences. I already talked about my story that I wanted to share, the student that hit and got suspended, but the problem was that the staff did not support the student the way that he was supposed to. Um, so that was not an appropriate consequence for him. Um, but there should there should be a consequence. If there's hitting, and it might not happen right away, or it might be a natural consequence that does happen right away. Maybe if a student hits another student right away, that student's not going to want to play and like separate them. I've also been, I've also had someone recently tell me that they didn't like having their children going to school with children that were physically aggressive because the staff doesn't have any consequence for that student. And that is not okay. There should be a consequence because if we're not going to be safe, we need to figure out a way to teach that student how to be safe. Um, Plus, kids do hit. It's not just disabled students that hit other kids. Kids hit. And so it's important that we continue to have that conversation of like why we don't hit. And a student doesn't have to be speaking to be able like to hear us. Like we should always be pursuing competence and assume that when we're talking to students in an age appropriate, maybe language is simplified kind of way, but like giving them the information that they need of like, hey, like we don't hit. Like, why do you think we don't hit? Maybe we don't hit because like, our friends aren't going to want to play if we're hitting them. But if we're frustrated because they're not sharing, could we say share? Could we say play? Could we use our AAC device? Could we use this like picture icon to say like my turn? And being able to figure out again what they're trying to communicate and then how we can give them a better way to do that communication. So it's not um, hurting other people. Woo, man, I have talked a lot. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Um, okay. In here, I also want to talk about just like slightly of like always working towards some sort of like reward is helpful. It also kind of redirects kids. And personally, I use it as an adult when I'm like, okay, I'm waking up really early tomorrow to work out, and I'm going to reward myself by going to Starbucks to get a coffee. Like, this is not something that just like magically goes away someday. We can give them appropriate rewards to be like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to do this. And if I can like communicate that I need to take a break and leave, like maybe I'll get a reward after recess to get like some time with the sensory with like slime or I don't know, whatever thing. It just whatever the reward is, it can't be something that they like actively need. So like which is why I don't like putting food as rewards because like food is just something kids need. And if they're hungry, there might be behaviors. So making food a reward just doesn't work for me. And I would say most people, it just doesn't really work. So making sure that there's just like something that they can like work towards, like redirect, something that like is reminding them like, okay, I don't want to do this, so I can do this. Um, and again, with like, especially if a child is like hitting or kicking, um, peers, it is really important that everybody is safe. I will never say that all like, just ignore the behavior because like that's what's best for that student. It's more like the number one priority is that people feel safe in the classroom, the student, the staff. And so if somebody gets hit, removing the situation is key. That's what we do first. And then we have to check in with everybody. We need to have a conversation and an appropriate consequence. Um, and again, you got to make sure everyone's regulated. You can't just take somebody away and then start telling them the consequence because if they're upset, they're not going to be able to hear you. So you have to stop, drop, and roll and get them regulated again to be able to connect with them again. Oh, I think I see. Oh, I posted a question in the Q&A box. I'm sorry. I had that up and then I took it away because I had too many screens up. Okay. It was a student teacher's question about lying behavior. Although it's not an aggressive behavior, I believe it could be resolved using some of the principles that you've addressed. Um, oh, I see the Q&A box. Um, okay. I had a teacher ask a student who lies a lot. Okay, so um, lying, who, man, that's a tricky one. So I do think lying is a big behavior that where I'm actually dealing with this with my 4.5-year-old right now. And we try to, because we don't really say lying because that is like a word that doesn't really have a definition for her. But we talk about like how we want to trust each other and I want to trust what she's telling me is accurate so I can support it the way that it needs to be supported. And if she does keep, and like we can have fun stories, we can have like these fictional imagination stories, but it's important that everyone involved knows if it's an imagination story or like a real story. And so, and the boy who cried wolf is like I would say a good story about talking about lying, even though my child loves the story a little too much and I have to keep repeating it. Um, but sometimes when she says something that I know is a lie, I'll go back and be like, "Oh, is that like an imagination story or do we feel like you're telling me the truth?" Or, however I'll word it. And if she says again, like, nope, that's the truth, but it's like very clearly not the truth, I'll be like, oh, well, I asked if you put your clothes away, and I can see that you did not put your clothes away. So instead, you can say this. And so it's kind of like that. You have to like keep kind of telling them because being able to tell the truth and a lie, like that's something kids are constantly learning because I mean, a lot of elementary school that's students who are like, I don't want to get in trouble, so I'm gonna lie because I know that I won't get in trouble. Like they're kind of like out for themselves. And so it's like we have to give them that safe place to be able to tell the truth and like us not yell at them for something, but being able to have like a good conversation to support everybody's needs in this area. I hope that kind of helped. Um, and the person who asked, I came late for the webinar. Yes, you will get the slides at the very end. I have another QR code, and I'm pretty sure you can always get them um, from, I don't know, if you even reach out to me at like my email or something, which I'll have at the end, I can give you the slides. Okay, so thank you. Truth telling, yes. Okay. Actually, you know what? I'm just really quickly going to talk about sharing too. Sharing I get so frustrated because I hear so many parents be like, you have to share, you have to share. And so I'll start hearing kids being like, you have to share, but they don't know what sharing means. Like they kind of know sometimes they get a toy and then sometimes they have to give up a toy, but they don't actually know what sharing is like. Oh, turn taking. Maybe we're going to have a timer, or maybe we're going to try to play together, or maybe we're going to, whatever it is. And so I feel like that goes along with like lying that kids don't always know the definition, but they're like, okay, so I got in trouble for that, but why did I get in trouble for that? Because I didn't want to clean up my clothes. So it's like really fun detective work, in my opinion. As an educator, I do really like figuring out what kids are not understanding based off of like their behavior towards how I'm responding to them, if, if that works out. Okay. Creating a safe space. These are all links when you have my slides. The dog is like a heavy dog that like can maybe give them some sensory pressure that they might need. Alternate seating, I feel like is so much more common these days. Like standing while doing their work. Maybe they need to walk around and come back and do their work. And then being able to have this conversation with the class. Everyone's not going to work the same. And this idea of like fairness is something you do need to talk about. One of my favorite ways to talk about fairness with kids is like and these are like ability awareness activities kind of, where you like bring 4 or 5 kids up and give each one an imaginary injury. So it's like you cut your finger, you broke your leg, you hit your head, you have a fever, I don't know, are feeling sick. And and then you go to each one and you give them a Band-Aid. And you're like, okay, so who did that help? And maybe it hurt the person who cut their finger. But is that going to help a person with a fever? No. And so it basically goes over like we all have these different needs to be met. And just because one person is getting a Band-Aid doesn't mean we all need a Band-Aid. But like, how can we make sure we're all getting the support we need? And kind of understand this like I don't know, kind of like having the conversation of fairness to kids. Because a lot of kids will be like, well, wait, why don't I have that? That's not fair. Like being able to say, like, well, that student needs headphones to be like to concentrate better on their work. Do you feel like you might need headphones? Would you like to try that out? Like maybe we can talk to your parents, blah, blah, blah. Having that conversation. Okay, I'm slightly speeding up because I see that I only have like 10 minutes left, but we only have a couple slides left. So we are going good. Let me just see. Okay, when I leave one chat, the other chat goes away. So put your question in both if you have any more. Okay, one of my favorite techniques that I have used in the classroom and with my partner, with our kids, is the switch technique. So, and it started in the classroom. So you're working with a student. They're having these behaviors. Maybe they're getting really like they start pinching and they're like kind of pinching your arm and you're just like, you're trying to redirect, you're trying to do the BIP and you're just getting really frustrated and you're just like, "Oh my God, like just stop, just, whatever." If you feel like you're getting frustrated, you can say switch, and whatever adult is the closest one to you will switch with you. No questions asked. There's no conversation that has to go on. You just switch. That person will then support the student while the other person takes, a 2-minute break, whatever, or maybe goes and works with the other student that that person was with. Um, and then it can also work as if, maybe I'm working with a student and I'm just starting to get frustrated and I'm just like, come on, just like walk down the stairs. All of the random examples I am giving you are true examples that I have felt and have gone through with students or kids of mine. Um, but I like one time I was trying to get a student to go down the stairs and he just like did not want to walk down the stairs and he was non-speaking. He had an AAC device, but one hand was on the rail. I was holding his other hand. He had no way to communicate whatever reason he didn't want to go down the stairs, other than my goal was to get him down the stairs and he just started like whining, trying to sit down, trying to like get out of me holding his hand. And I was getting so frustrated, but I was just trying to finish the task. And the other teacher came over and was like, well, I was an aide at this time. And the teacher said, switch. And so I was just like, okay, fine, and I remember leaving being like, well, good luck getting him to go down the stairs. And she just very calmly, dropped to his level and was like, hey, like, we're going to go down the stairs to PT right now. Do you want to hold my hand or do you want to take a break? And he held her hand and happily walked down the stairs. Um, who knows? Maybe I was trying to rush him too much. But it was a very good moment for me to reflect on my own dysregulation that the student wasn't listening to me and I was getting frustrated. And then I wasn't able to help him in the way that he needed it. Thankfully, we had another adult who switched with me and it all worked out. Um, but it's those moments where we as adults can all also rely on each other. And me and my partner do this all the time at home. We have two very small kids. There are a lot of times that one of us will start just getting really dysregulated. And it's like, you know what? You be with the kids. I'm just going to step outside for a second and like scream in the car. That is fine. We are adults and we have found these great ways to help regulate ourselves. But we do need to rely on each other so we can all support our children, our students in the classroom. So that is my favorite thing. The other thing is that you cannot say no to a switch. So if that teacher came over to me and said switch, like even if I wanted to complete that task with the student, I had to leave. And because of that, okay, I see I have a chat. How do I open this? Um, because of that, like, and I'm sorry, if you do have a problem with that, then after it's all done, then you can talk to the adult and be like, you know what, I really wanted to follow through with that student. Next time, can you check in with me before you switch? Or like, just like talk it out is something that's really important. Okay, I see. Oh, Oh, no, nothing, not a chat I need to respond to. Okay. Next is hand under hand. This is if you click the YouTube button, it will show you a video about hand under hand. It does talk about with the deaf blind community, but this is something that I feel like benefits everybody. I am really not for hand over hand support with a student. Um, that makes it much harder for them to advocate for their own needs. Hand under hand would be like if I'm rolling a ball of Play-Doh and their hands are on top of mine, feeling that I'm rolling the ball. Maybe I'm just like supporting their wrist by like some touch cues for like writing. This will really, and how many times I've walked into a classroom and have seen paras or teachers just holding a kid's hand and like moving them through the motions. The kid's not learning anything. You're not learning, like you're just like going through the moves. No parent wants an activity done by the para or the teacher. They want it done by their kids. So hand in your hand is super important. And I feel like that will also take away a lot of behaviors because when a student is trying to like, get out of your grip, you should let them. They're trying to advocate for their own needs. Um, know when to leave. So you know yourself best. You know when you're feeling dysregulated. A dysregulated adult is only going to teach a dysregulated child how to become a dysregulated adult. So to break that cycle, you need to show how to regulate yourself. And that will, I promise you, help the student and children how to regulate as well. And then learning more about behavior. Here are some books that I just absolutely love. The Reason I Jump is an autistic person who wrote a man who wrote this book answering questions about his autism. And just it's a really great book of like answering questions of like why he like flaps his hands and why like how much he understands when people communicate to him. The Whole Brain Child is what I talked about at the beginning. Such a great book to really go over empathy with an adult brain to a child brain. Lost at School is a great book about behavior as well. And then What Happened to You is like Oprah and some doctor talking about trauma and what it does to the brain and how we can, again, break the cycle of like giving children that support to learn how to, in a more healthy way, feel those big feelings and dysregulation. So, of course, I'm going to have to end it with filling up your own cup is so important. I know people talk about this so much, but self-care is really important as a teacher, as a parent, anybody who is working with. When you are teaching people how to constantly regulate themselves or learn how to be independent, learn how to communicate, that is exhausting. And it is a lot of just draining your own battery. I love that quote, you can't pour from an empty cup. Like it's just so true. You can't support people if you are dysregulated. So you have to find time for yourself. You have to drink water throughout the day. You have to get sleep. You have to find hobbies and do things for yourself so you can be a better educator and parent for your kids. I have something about once a week. I call it a Kayla day. Sometimes I just go to Starbucks and I just work on whatever I want to work on. But it is like time away from my beautiful children that I get to just be by myself and not answering all these questions and trying to clean things. And if I go 2 weeks without getting a Kayla day, everybody around me knows because I just become a much meaner person. And I would not say I'm usually a mean person. Um, Okay, so that is it. Here is the QR code again. So you have like a view only version of the slides. And again, there are so many things linked. All those books are linked, YouTube videos are linked, all those things to keep your classroom, whatever I said, like set up your classroom with like more resources. Um, If you have more questions, you can find me on social media it's called Inclusion Starts Now is my name for everything. So all the social media stuff, you can look me up at inclusionstartsnow.com, email me at kayla@inclusionstartsnow.com. Um, and I'm so happy you guys were here for this conversation. I'm going to check the chat one more time. Okay. I think I've answered all the questions. So thank you so much for being here, everybody. And I hope to connect with you all more.
Thank you so much, Kayla, and thank you everyone for joining us. Next week's webinar is at 2, and I put that in the chat for Century Technology to measure social interactions of children with disabilities. Thank you all, and have a great day.